Shalom to the elect of Israel, to the hopefully elect of Israel. You Hebrew Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indian, and Haitians. Got to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, the Most High, the Heavenly Father. His name is Yahweh, not Yahweh, not Jehovah, not God, not Elohim, not Ahia. It's Yahweh. His only begotten son name is Yahweh Shai. Not Yahshua, not Yeshua, not Jesus Christos, not Serapis Christus, not Yeshaya, not Jesus Christ. It's Yahweh Shai. So we got to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rekah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well. And a sincere salutation to all the Akim, pushing this truth and believing this truth through the four winds of the earth, the entire world, waking up the hopeful elect. And shalom to the Outwalk who are listening and learning, the few sisters who are listening and learning. I'm Isaiah from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you another lesson in truth, facts, faith, and edification. Another daily edification. Lord's willing, let's be edifying. And this is another update on the pandemic coronavirus. Lord willing, let's be edifying.
Good evening. Within the past couple of hours, the Italian Prime Minister has announced restrictions on movement across the entire country in the most drastic response yet to the spread of coronavirus. The measures include a ban on all public gatherings and all schools and universities will be closed. Giuseppe Conte said the measures were necessary to defend the most fragile members of the community, and he declared that the best thing for Italians to do was to stay at home. In Italy, the death toll has risen by nearly 100 in the past 24 hours, and there are more than 9,000 confirmed cases of coronavirus. Our correspondent, Mark Lowen, has the latest now. We join him in Bologna.
Hugh, tonight, Italy, a founding member of the EU and one of the world's most visited countries, is facing the most dramatic restrictions it has faced in peacetime. 2 days since much of the north was quarantined, coronavirus cases continue to soar, and so now the restrictions have been extended to cover the whole of the country, covering cities like here in Bologna that thought they'd escaped the worst of it. The virus is outpacing attempts to control it. Bologna was today out of the red zone, no longer. Italy, all of it, is now under the most severe restrictions since the Second World War. Public transport will still run, but the Prime Minister has told people to stay at home, except for urgent need.
La decisione giusta oggi.
The right decision is to stay home. Our future is in our hands. We must be responsible. There will be no more red zones, no more zones 1 and 2. The entire Italy will be under protection. We will avoid movements across the entire country.
Applying for false permits to move around will be a criminal offence. Schools and universities are closed until early April. All sports matches are cancelled. Italy is now a laboratory for how to stop this virus and ease the pressure on doctors like Elena.
It's an emergency situation. I may be asked to work in a department where there's more need. We've never faced anything like this, and we're not ready.
One of Europe's best health systems is creaking under the weight, seriously short of space in intensive care. All medical staff leave has been cancelled. We got through to a doctor in quarantined Milan.
It is very difficult to forecast when we will have the breakpoint of the epidemic, the peak of the epidemic. We are near to the collapse in the most organized part of the country.
New measures to limit visiting rights caused riots in prisons today. Several inmates escaped. 7 died, a microcosm of the drastic pressure Italy is now under. The virus surging, an economy battered, and now nationwide quarantines. It's a combustible mix. Hugh, it's still unclear how these restrictions will actually be enforced. Over the past couple of days, as we have travelled around the perimeter of the previous restriction zone, we have not seen police checkpoints. Flights have operated in and out of the country. So we wait to see tonight just how much of a shutdown this really is and whether it really can begin to contain the coronavirus outbreak.
Mark, many thanks again. Mark Lone with the very latest there for us in the city of Bologna. Well, stock markets around the world have fallen sharply during the day, with share values marking the worst day since the financial crisis of 2008. Trading was briefly suspended in the United States because of the turbulence there. Followed a drop in oil prices, which compounded the growing economic concerns around coronavirus. Our economics editor, Faisal Islam, has this report.
The opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. The smiles didn't last, trading having to be halted after just 4 minutes, in which time the Dow Jones Index tumbled 7%, or nearly 2,000 points.
A market that's full of anxiety about the potential economic global slowdown due to the virus, which I don't even think we've seen yet, and you end up with a perfect storm. That's what we have in there today.
It was part of the knock-on effect of the global spread of coronavirus to 100 countries around the world. Global falls started in Asia, spreading to Europe, where Italian markets slumped 11% today, German markets were down 8%, and in the UK the FTSE 100 also tumbled 8%, the sharpest fall since the financial crisis a decade ago.
These extraordinary moves in global stock markets matter not just because of the impact on your pensions and investments. There are impacts on government budgets and business spending too. There were also historic moves in connected markets such as oil and in government borrowing too. And all this matters because of what it reveals right now. Understandable uncertainty about the actual outbreak of the virus, but unpredicted consequences of how nations respond economically and diplomatically.
Today's moves were triggered by a collapse in oil prices after top oil producers Saudi Arabia and Russia fell out over the impact of the virus, leading to slumping demand for oil. Both are now pumping crude into the market. President Trump blamed that spat and the fake news for the sharp drops, adding it was good news for consumers filling up their cars. But today's fall does suggest a scepticism that world leaders have got a grip of the crisis.
Markets don't have much confidence that governments and central banks are going to be able to support the economy through this coronavirus epidemic. I think there's a worry that central banks don't have too much scope to cut interest rates, and there's a concern that governments will be too slow to stimulate the economy.
This is not just a trading panic. The market's asking big questions about not only the speed and effectiveness of efforts to contain the virus and its economic impact, but also uncomfortable trade-offs between the two. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
Well, earlier this evening, Israel announced that all travellers entering the country would be required to quarantine themselves for 2 weeks to try to limit the spread of coronavirus. The Israeli leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, said that it was a difficult decision, but the measure was essential to safeguard public health, he said, and the decision will apply to foreign citizens from Thursday. Here in the UK, a fifth person has died of coronavirus on the day the government outlined the latest stage of its response to the crisis. The chief medical advisor for England warned that anyone showing even minor signs of respiratory tract infections or a fever will soon be told to isolate themselves for 7 days. It's the next stage of tackling the outbreak, which is set to spread in a significant way within the coming fortnight. As of today, there were 319 confirmed cases in the UK. Almost 25,000 people have been tested so far. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, has the latest.
Tonight's message from Downing Street: events may be moving fast, but they're taking their time, working out the right types of intervention to be used to try to stem the tide of the coronavirus.
While it's absolutely critical in managing the spread of this virus, that we take the right decisions at the right time, based on the latest and best evidence. So we mustn't do things which have no or limited medical benefit, nor things which could turn out actually to be counterproductive.
But officials announced one significant change to advice likely in the near future.
We are now very close to the time probably within the next 10 to 14 days, when the modelling would imply we should move to a situation where we say everybody who has even minor respiratory tract infections or a fever should be self-isolating for 7 days afterwards.
2 more patients in the UK have died with the coronavirus, one in their 70s at New Cross Hospital, part of the Royal Wolverhampton Trust, the other an individual at the Epsom and St Helier Trust. Both had underlying health problems. Elsewhere in Europe, Italy faces a huge challenge with the whole country now effectively under quarantine. But other countries have seen a surge in case numbers. In France, there have been more than 1,200 with 19 deaths. There's now a ban on all gatherings of more than 1,000 people. In Germany, case numbers are above 1,100 and 2 have died. The government's also considering stopping large public events. Spain has seen nearly 980 cases and 25 deaths. Madrid's authorities have closed schools and universities for 2 weeks. One expert told me she thought the UK's response, without any such bans or closures, was well judged so far, but the European figures could be a sign of troubled times ahead.
These are countries that we would anticipate as being able to contain a virus like this, or at least this kind of spread of infection. So it is concerning that they've struggled to do it, and I think it suggests that once there is the development of ongoing person-to-person transmission within a country, it becomes much harder to stem the tide of this infection.
Off the Californian coast, a cruise ship carrying some people who've tested positive for the virus headed for port. The mood of more than 140 British passengers and crew was much improved. They've been told they'll be tested, and if there are no symptoms, will be allowed to board a special flight set to get them back to the UK on Wednesday. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Well, a number of major sporting events have now been postponed because of the virus. France has called off its Six Nations rugby match against Ireland in Paris, and Italy has postponed its game against England in Rome. But most sporting events here in the UK are still going on for now, including one of the highlights of the racing calendar, the Cheltenham Festival, which starts tomorrow. Let's join our sports editor, Dan Rowan, who's there for us. And Dan, what's the latest thinking there?
Well, Hugh, 60,000 race fans are expected to come through these gates for the first day of the festival tomorrow, and as many as almost 250,000 across the next 4 days. Cheltenham is on, and that's because the government has made clear today that according to their medical advice, there's still no reason why large-scale sports events should be closed or cancelled. But of course, elsewhere, sport is being badly affected. In the US, a major tennis tournament was cancelled overnight. The third Six Nations match of this season's tournament was today postponed. And across Italy, all sport has been suspended this evening. And of course, inevitably, that has raised questions as to whether it's right here in Britain for sport to continue as normal. Now, today, sports bodies and broadcasters were summoned to a meeting and told to ready themselves for sport to be ordered to go behind closed doors. But I think it's fair to say the government are concerned on 2 levels. One, that it may cause financial ruin for many sports clubs, especially in the Football League and also in rugby as well. And secondly, that it could be counterproductive if all it does is drive fans to enclosed spaces like pubs where the virus could spread just as bad, if not worse. So this is a very difficult decision, but there's a sense it's coming, and it's not a matter of if, but now when.
Dan, many thanks again for the latest there in Cheltenham. Dan Rowan, our sports editor. Well, with me is our health editor, Hugh Pym. We heard from him earlier in the report there. Can we talk about the advice that was given today, Hugh, and the kind of change in advice and the change of tone as well, really? How significant was that?
Well, Hugh, potentially significant. Right now, the position is only if you come back from one of the worst affected countries on the list and develop symptoms do you then self-isolate and contact 111. Now, Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Advisor, has said within a couple of weeks it's very probable we'll move to a different set of guidelines for anybody with these symptoms, no matter where they've been, for example, a dry cough, a cold, a temperature, to go and self-isolate. Now, that change, I think, is significant because it's saying that they expect coronavirus cases to carry on rising, seasonal flu to fall away, so you might as well get everyone to self-isolate for 7 days after the first appearance of these symptoms.
Tonight, obviously, we've been talking about Italy and the drastic measures announced there by the Prime Minister earlier this evening. Boris Johnson was asked very pointedly earlier today, You know, there are countries taking very, very rigorous measures. Why aren't we? Now, what is the answer they're giving you to that?
Well, very dramatic move in Italy. The British government position is, and of course there are far fewer cases here so far, is that different countries will do this in different ways. Right now they're weighing up the social cost of big interventions and the timing. There's no point going too early with bans. You can't then take it off the table if it doesn't work to begin with and you lose public confidence. So they're weighing all that up, but I do sense that we're not that far off from some sort of announcements of interventions to try to stem the growth of this virus.
Hugh, once again, thanks very much. Hugh Pym, our health editor. Well, as the international community struggles to contain the spread of coronavirus, the World Health Organization has praised China for its response, suggesting it offers a model for others to follow. But inside China, there's anger over the way that the authorities have handled the outbreak, with censorship being stepped up, the very approach that experts say helped to accelerate the spread in the first place. Our correspondent John Sudworth has more details.
In this message, a medic complains about the quality of protective equipment. The video's now being blocked on the Chinese internet. This one's been taken down too, a daughter crying out for her dead mother. Ever since China silenced Dr. Li Wenliang, who tried to warn about the dangers of the virus and later died from it, the censorship has been increasing.
The WHO asks these questions.
But the World Health Organization insists it's not its place to criticize.
We are epidemiologists, not litigators. We know that the country has identified that there were shortcomings. It is not WHO's role at this stage. Our role is to really help with the positive lessons of moving forward.
In China, focusing on anything other than the positive can be dangerous. This reporter records a few final words before opening the door to the police. Li Zhenhua was detained, it seems, for trying to report independently about the virus. But now, efforts are underway to capture and save some of the censored information.
China is repeating itself back to what happened like during SARS.
One of the anonymous researchers tells me China keeps making the same mistakes. During the SARS virus in 2002, censorship was also rife.
They were trying to hide the information, and that's why people lost lives.
China wants the world to focus not on how censorship may have cost lives, but on the strengths of a system that has now brought the epidemic under control. And the WHO seems to agree.
What do you think of the criticism that China's political and economic clout makes it very difficult for the WHO to criticize?
There is a large epidemic happening. We have seen how, through a concerted national effort at the top level of government, has flattened that epidemic and gained the time for other countries to learn those lessons and not to have to face that same issue.
Some Chinese citizens are unconvinced that anyone should feel grateful for the efforts of the party. A point being made by the professor in this video. It's been blocked. John Sudworth, BBC News, Beijing.
And you can keep up to date with all the developments concerning the coronavirus outbreak, including the symptoms to look out for and lots of background and scientific expertise as well on the BBC News app and on our website bbc.co.
Italy has expanded its response to the coronavirus by locking down the entire country. Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte says that as of this morning, travel restrictions will apply to the whole of Italy and not just the north as before. More than 9,000 are infected with the virus and more than 460 people have died across the country.
Empty restaurant chairs, a common sight now in Italy, which has extended its emergency coronavirus measures to cover the whole country. Public gatherings are banned. Only bars, restaurants and cafes that guarantee customers can remain at least 1 meter apart can open, and all must close at dusk. On the eve of the bumped-up measures taking hold, for some diners, the last evening meal out for a while. Italy's Prime Minister outlined the measures and took the nation's youth to task.
And this is another one. Just showing a couple clips.
Back in port, but weeks away from being home.
Let me go back.
Arriving under the Golden Gate Bridge, tonight the 3,500 people aboard the Grand Princess cruise ship are finally back in port, but weeks away from being home. With the sick disembarking first, all passengers will slowly file through medical screening.
Whenever you open your door, please make sure you are wearing your mask.
After their doomed voyage to Hawaii turned into a coronavirus outbreak of at least 21 cases, passengers will soon head to quarantine at military bases.
It's kind of nerve-wracking and unsettling that, we're stuck in the unknown and we're at the mercy of the government.
As scenes like this one play out at sea, the State Department issuing a clear warning. U.S. citizens, particularly travelers with underlying health conditions, should not travel by cruise ship. Kerry Sanders is in Florida.
They call this the cruise ship capital. Today, 6 ships leaving the port of Miami. Some passengers say while they're anxious, they're not going to let coronavirus ruin their vacation plans.
While the number of sick in a growing tally of states across the country is soaring, doctors expect a spike in coronavirus cases as more people get tested. Outside Seattle, where at least 22 have died, a drive-through clinic at a local hospital testing dozens per day.
They stay in their cars, they roll down their window, and then we swab them.
Amid a massive run on supplies, universities across the country, including Princeton and Stanford, are telling students to stay home temporarily.
The prompt response is the right thing to do.
Worried that fear is spreading faster than the virus, the CDC says the risk is different in every community. Americans should not panic. 80% of cases won't require any medical care. But those most vulnerable, the elderly with underlying health conditions, should stock up on food, medication, supplies, and be prepared to stay at home. In New York City, the mayor is now encouraging businesses to let employees telecommute, hoping to reduce crowds on the subway. Tonight, a growing effort to contain the virus and manage fear, just as another cruise ship loaded with those who are sick reaches shore.
Miguel joins us now. We see the ship behind you. How long before these folks can get off the ship?
Well, Lester, because there are so many passengers aboard, we're told it could take up to 3 days for all of them to disembark. Many of them will go to nearby Travis Air Force Base for their 14-day quarantine. And Lester, in another indication of just how worrisome the virus has become, the mayor in Boston says they are now canceling that city's St. Patrick's Day parade. Lester?
That's a big call. All right. Thank you, Miguel. Now to the growing economic impact of all this and another huge plunge on Wall Street today. The Dow losing more than 2,000 points, almost 8% of its value. Here's senior business correspondent Stephanie Rule.
Stocks today plummeting, triggering a market circuit breaker just 4 minutes after opening bell.
There you see the cessation in ticks on the S&P.
Trading began again 15 minutes later, but the market still closed near bear territory. The collapse fueled by the oil price war and uncertainty over coronavirus, hitting some industries harder than others. Air travelers sharing pictures of airports and planes virtually empty, many carriers already slashing routes. Cruise liners are also dealing with canceled plans and ships far below capacity. Many companies already taking action, trying to balance stemming the spread of coronavirus and keeping business afloat. Amazon will pay hourly workers, even those working from home, and is asking employees in several states to work remotely through March. And there's speculation about whether tourist hotspot Disney World will remain open after the company closed certain parks in Asia until further notice. Small businesses are also struggling.
This is prime lunchtime.
Sam Ip says there has been a 50% drop in foot traffic at his family's Chinese restaurant.
If this continues, I'm not even sure how long I could survive like this.
We need to think about helping hardworking individuals that want to go to work. Some of them are showing up for work and cannot get paid because there's no customers coming in.
And for the millions of Americans who don't have the option of working remotely, like service industry employee
That's that grinding ceasing, man. And the door shall be shut in the streets, man. Yeah. It's happening. It's happening big time, man.
And gig economy workers.
I am very scared today, especially today.
The idea of not being able to bring home a paycheck can be daunting.
And Stephanie joins me now. We've been seeing a lot of these roller coaster days, but that was a big...
Hey, it's saying Isaiah 32 that the vintage shall fail and the gathering shall not come. And the gathering Salakia. The vintage shall fail and the gathering shall not come. You see? And your job is going to fail and your money will not come in, man. And these things is happening, man. They happening. While Jake's sitting right here playing games, the economy is collapsing, man. Okay? We are in a retail apocalypse. It is serious.
Big drop today. Should we be concerned?
Lester, concern is fair, but it's not a time to panic. We're not facing the financial crisis today. What we're facing is a public health emergency, and the underlying economy is still strong. With patience, we're going to see that strength again. You know, I read something today that said, treat your 401k like you're being told to treat your face. Do not touch it.
That's not easier said than done as well, but your point is taken.
At least not yet.
All right, Stephanie, thank you. There's growing concern in Washington after a senator and 4 House members were in contact with a man infected with the coronavirus. After that, 2 of the congressmen came within close proximity to President Trump. Our Jeff Bennett is at the White House.
As financial markets tumble and the number of U.S. cases of coronavirus climbs, President Trump tonight continuing to downplay the outbreak as the coronavirus crisis hits close to home on Capitol Hill. At least 4 Republican lawmakers, Ted Cruz, Matt Gaetz, Paul Gosar, and Doug Collins, now choosing to self-quarantine after unknowingly interacting with an infected person at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Maryland last month. Collins seen shaking hands with President Trump on Friday. Gaetz seen traveling with the president today. The outbreak sparking new anxiety among lawmakers. NBC's Casey Hunt.
Members of Congress are becoming increasingly anxious about coronavirus, and there's growing pressure on leaders to take steps to protect lawmakers. But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says tonight there are no plans to change the schedule or close the Capitol.
Meantime, White House officials are growing increasingly frustrated at what they see as President Trump's persistent attempts to minimize the threat posed by the outbreak. Multiple sources tell NBC News. The president's message at odds with Trump administration health officials.
We're helping communities understand you're going to see more cases. Unfortunately, you're going to see more deaths.
I don't think we've seen the worst yet. I think we'll still continue to see more infections.
One source tells NBC News the president thinks his approach is good politics, even though he's been advised to let the experts do the talking.
So, Jeff, what is the administration prepared to do to help calm the markets?
Well, Lester, NBC News has learned administration officials have presented the president with a list of policy changes aimed at limiting the economic fallout of the coronavirus outbreak, including paid sick leave and assistance for the hardest hit industries. Lester?
All right, Jeff Bennett at the White House, thank you. A growing number of schools and colleges around the country are taking no chances with the coronavirus, canceling classes for days or even weeks in some cases. We get more on that from NBC's Rahema Ellis.
Everybody on their computer right now.
Carrie Hopperstadt's 3 sons are home today. For the next 2 weeks, they'll be learning online.
It's kind of ramping up, learning the technology, figuring out what each teacher is expecting.
Their school outside of Seattle is closed, one of many districts in states across the country that sent students home. In Scarsdale, a suburb of New York City, children will be out through the middle of next week after a teacher tested positive for the virus.
Thinking about the logistics of the next couple of weeks.
The reality of prolonged school shutdowns as a precautionary measure could be crippling. 22 million students rely on free or reduced price school lunches. For many, it's their only hot meal of the day. While health and safety are the priority, it's unclear how much keeping students home will slow the spread of the virus.
You can imagine families where parents don't have paid leave, who are working at relatively low-paid jobs, who have to stay home to take care of their kids, and they lose their basic source of support.
Several colleges canceling classes and study abroad programs.
I think everybody's just on edge trying to figure out what's happening.
After someone at Columbia University was exposed to the virus, that school canceled in-person classes, announcing it would transition to to online learning by the end of the week. You think the college did the right thing by suspending classes for these 2 days?
Yeah, I definitely think it was a good idea, especially just to limit the spread within our classes.
The new reality of learning while staying safe. Rahima Ellis, NBC News, New York.
All right, we're back tonight. The World Health Organization says more than 100 countries have confirmed cases of...
Hey, we should be homeschooling our kids anyway, man. Those of you that have kids, man, you should be homeschooling them anyway.
Coronavirus, and now Italy is taking stunning and unprecedented steps to stop the spread. Richard Engel has more.
The Italian government tonight put the entire country on lockdown. All Italy now a zona rossa, a red zone. Before, the restrictions only applied to northern and central Italy. But tonight, the country that invented the term quarantine told its 60 million people they should stay at home.
Wow.
American Ali Asplin is on a U.S. military base in northern Italy.
But we're just doing the best we can, and the commanders are doing the best they can to keep people calm and give them the information that they deserve to know.
There are those furious at being confined. 6 died in prison riots in Italy. Inmates worried they're locked in with a killer they can't see. Italy's sweeping restrictions came just hours after the World Health Organization came within a hair's breadth of calling this a global pandemic.
Now that the virus has a foothold in so many countries, the threat of a pandemic has become very real.
In Israel, the government announcing all citizens returning from abroad will be put in quarantine. But in China, where the virus originated, some encouraging news. 11 of the 14 emergency hospitals crash built for the virus are closing, according to state TV. And the number of new cases, says the government, is declining. But the genie is already out of the bottle. Several virologists I've spoken to say we actually have no idea how many coronavirus infections there are because few countries have done widespread testing. But they expect the U.S. will increasingly become a hotspot.
Richard Engel, thank you. Millions of Americans living in nursing.
Hey, North America would be a hotspot, man. Thus saith the scriptures, man.
Homes and long-term.
Thus saith Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai, man. Hey, you have had the warning, man. Starting with the apostles of Great Millstone. The apostles and elders of Great Millstone. You had the warning.
Care facilities, and after the devastating effect of the coronavirus in Washington state, many families worry whether they're prepared for more outbreaks. NBC's Jolene Kent has that story.
Tonight, nursing homes across the country scrambling to increase safety protocols as healthcare experts warn that the elderly face the highest risk.
I can no longer sit around and wait for a phone call to tell me my loved one has died.
Families in Washington state still waiting for answers about their loved ones at Life Care Center, the epicenter of the U.S. outbreak. 13 residents there have died from coronavirus.
We cannot make any promises that further exposure within the facility is not happening.
1 million residents in long-term care facilities contract serious infections every year. Of those patients, 380,000 die, and that's before coronavirus.
Are nursing homes ready for coronavirus?
I think most are, but some are not.
Dr. Noah Marco is aggressively beefing up procedures to keep it out of his nursing facility in Los Angeles, including this tent outside where staff took our temperature and asked a series of questions before entering.
I'm quite concerned that nursing homes will be overstressed by this challenge.
His advice, concerned families with a loved one in nursing care should always ask a series of critical questions.
Did they order hand hygiene? Do they have personal protective equipment? What education are they providing to their staff?
Doctors also advise the best way to make sure your loved one is being taken care of is to go visit in person and ask questions. And if you're not feeling well, just stay home. Lester?
Hey, man, this thing is breaking out everywhere, man. This is the last one. We're going to play this, and it just updates, man.
Italy's coronavirus epidemic, already the second most deadly after China, has taken another dramatic turn. With more than 60 million people, the country's entire population under lockdown from Tuesday. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte says he's extending restrictions on movement after another spike in deaths from the coronavirus. All public gatherings are banned and schools and universities closed until April the 3rd.
Non ci sarà più. There will no longer be a red zone. There will no longer be a zone 1 and zone 2 in the country. There will only be Italy, a protected zone. So across the whole peninsula, people should avoid all movement, unless they are for 3 specific reasons: for work, emergencies, or health reasons.
16 million people in the north of the country have been under lockdown since Sunday. Riots in 24 prisons across Italy followed restrictions on face-to-face visits. In Modena, 6 inmates died after they broke into the prison infirmary and overdosed on stocks of the heroin substitute methadone.
Wow.
As a warning, they posted some posters which say we can only go inside wearing a mask. They're only allowing visits of 1 family member at a time.
This was a hint of what chaos might ensue if the virus were to enter the confines of the prison system.
Uproars of the people, man.
It is almost everywhere else in Italy. These were rare scenes filmed inside a hospital in the northern town of Cremona. And also on lockdown, the financial capital Milan, one of the engines of the economy. Europe's major stock markets from Milan to Frankfurt, Paris and London all suffered dramatic falls on Monday, with share prices plummeting as the infection rate soars. The economic impact of the coronavirus is already substantial and will only grow. There are discomforting comparisons being made to the 2008 financial crisis, with concerns for the preparedness of European banks and businesses. On Tuesday, EU leaders will meet to try to come up with a unified response, but they won't meet here in person in Brussels with its steadily growing infection rate. Instead, they'll be holding a teleconference. The circumstances of this unique crisis continue to evolve, although not yet into a pandemic, says the World Health Organization, in which transmission of the virus is uncontrolled.
Now that the virus has a foothold in so many countries, the threat of a pandemic has become very real. But it would be the first pandemic in history that could be controlled.
There are signs of success against the virus in China, South Korea and Singapore, but not yet in Europe. Spain looks set to launch what's being described as shock therapy measures, possibly following France and Germany with school closures and restricted public gatherings. These are moves the government in Britain is not yet prepared to make, keen apparently to defer the enormous social and economic costs of fighting the coronavirus. But there will likely be no avoiding them. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.
Ilaria Capua is a virologist at the University of Florida and a former Italian politician. She says Italy has one of the world's biggest aging populations, making it more vulnerable to this outbreak.
I think that the system of reporting that is used in Italy is very, very different from systems that are being used in other countries. I think that it is likely that infection from Asia did not reach Italy only, but it reached a series of European countries, and that there have been intra-European circulation of the virus. And Italy is one of the countries infected by the coronavirus. It certainly has had a significant number of hospitalized patients, but Italy has a significant aging population. We are one of the countries with the longest life expectancy. Plus, the public service will take on any case. And therefore, I think that this is quite a unique situation compared to the rest of the world. I don't think that the virus, when it left before the Wuhan lockdown, went only to Italy. There are, as I said, many.
Now you see, it is what it is, man. This thing is real. We've been warning you. You have been warned. You better start prepping. And there's only one way to prep. And that's take the covering of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushua. It's only one way, man. And that's putting on the whole armor of the Lord. Okay? Isaiah 55:6, man. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Ecclesiastes 12:1. Remember the Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not. You got time, man. Lord willing is edifying. Got to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushua, Bahashem Rukak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well, and a sincere salutation to all that are pushing this truth and believing this truth throughout the four winds of the earth, the entire world, waking up the hopeful elect. And shalom to the outwalk who are listening and learning, the few sisters who are listening and learning. Lord's willing, this will edify. Until next time, I say shalom.